Hello everyone, and welcome to this video in which we'll be looking at a passage from the reading comprehension exercises of slot 1 of CAT 23 paper. In this video, we are not going to be solving the reading comprehension exercise. Rather, I'll be discussing how to read the passage and what information is it that you're supposed to gather from the information given inside the passage before you get to the questions of this exercise. If you have not read the passage before, I would encourage you to please pause the video, go and get the passage, get the CAT 23 paper from somewhere, read the passage and then watch this video. So if you look at this passage, from the very first paragraph, it becomes easy to get a sense of understanding as to what the main topic of discussion itself is. Because in the very first sentence, it's been told to us that a certain book had been published by a person called Marshall Salin. And about a year after he has died, this work is an essay to look at this book and then wonder why it had such an impact when it was released. And how has it fared since, which means how has the ideas of the book had a consequences on the sense of understanding of a particular thing that is discussed in the book in today's context, right? So that is what the entire passage is about. So the very first sentence should make the topic of discussion very clear, should make the source of the reading comprehension passage very clear, that it's an essay on a book in order to analyze the impact of the book on society, in order to understand why it had such an impact, and how has that impact changed or evolved since, and what relevance does it have to today's society. This is what the passage is about. So that's why the first part of the passage that you need to focus upon is this. If you have focused upon this and read this well enough, you know in the very first sentence what kind of a work of literature is it that you're going to read. Now looking at the next sentence tells us what this book is about. So it tells us that what Salin did in his book is that he is talking about the fact that before being driven into marginal environments or colonial past, hunter-gatherers or foragers were not engaged in a desperate struggle for meager survival. Quite the contrary, they satisfied their needs with far less work than people in agricultural and industrial societies, leaving them more time to use as they wished. Which means that in this entire book, Salin is presenting an argument that hunter-gatherers and foragers, contrary to popular belief, so people believe that hunter-gatherers and foragers were the underdeveloped, uncivilized part of the society, and later on we became civilized to practice agriculture, civilized to set up industries. So Salin says that is absolutely not true. In fact, hunter-gatherers and foragers lived very happily. They were not wanting to so-called progress in civilization, to bring in a sense of agricultural society or bring in industries into their own societies. They were very happy and satisfied with the kind of work that they were doing. This is the argument presented by Salin in his book. Now, the rest of the first paragraph and even the second paragraph is only reinforcing this point. If you move on to read the first paragraph, the rest of the first paragraph, you will find that the author is comparing hunters to bankers, and he's saying that hunters did not care about keeping bankers as hours, or they only kept bankers hours, which means that they work 9 to 5, and after that they were enjoying their leisure. They were only concerned about games of chance and chances of game. They did not want to maximize the number of animals that they're hunting. They were happy with whatever they were hunting, and then the rest of the time they were very, very contented and satisfied with their leisure life. In fact, the author in the next paragraph is giving us an example of the Hadza of Tanzania, and how there were people in this particular region who survived side by side on hunting gathering and in foraging, even when their neighbors, the neighboring societies, practice agriculture. And they were not forced to pick up agriculture. They did not feel that agricultural societies were better. They were just contented and happy with hunting, gathering, and foraging. So the same argument is being reinforced throughout these first and the second paragraph. So it becomes very easy to read till there. Now comes the third paragraph, in which we figure out the point of this essay, which had been mentioned in the very first sentence, that how has it fared since this point. This is being explored from the third paragraph onwards, because this paragraph starts with the fact that the point of this essay is not to check the validity of whatever historic evidence is being presented by Salin, but rather it is looking at the conceptual challenge that the ideas of Salin is providing to contemporary economic life in bourgeois individualism. Right, and this entire passage is about that how has it impacted the contemporary society, this particular idea, which has been presented by Salin. So that is what the author is going to do in the next two paragraphs. In the next paragraph, the author takes an example or takes a case of Kenneth Galbraith's work, The Affluent Society, from which apparently the title of Salin's book was also picked up from. But all that is fact. facts can be re-verified later on if it is required to answer the questions. But that is just pure fact. You don't have to pay a lot of attention to what is given here. This we can figure out later on if a question is asked about John Kenneth Galbraith and his book, The Affluent Society, that he wrote in 1958. That is not something that we need to focus upon. But what we need to focus upon is the ending part of this paragraph, which tells us that what kind of impact or why do contemporary societies still find Salin's ideas to be extremely impactful. It is because it talks about the road to affluence from a very different sense. That right now the road to affluence for us is to work really hard, is to earn a lot of money, is to buy as much stuff as we want, as many things as we want, to spend as much money as we humanly can. But there is one more way that we can reach this concept of affluence, and that is not by getting more, but by wanting less. So this is what Salin proposes as a way to affluence as well. And this is what is relevant to contemporary societies, that it is not true that foragers had been left behind. It is just that it is projected in that form that foragers had been left behind and they were wanting to get into a more affluent society because of the Western-centric narrative around agriculture and Western-centric narrative around industrialization. Right? So they do not want to accumulate material goods. The societies were guided by other values. They wanted leisure, they wanted mobility, they wanted freedom, and that they valued over monetary value and over physical commodities that they can accrue. That is not what they were after, and that is also a road to affluence. This is what was Salin's sense of an argument. So that is what is relevant to today's society as well, is what the author of this essay is saying. Last paragraph, what is it about? Again, in the very first sentence, it is made very clear that what the last paragraph is about. The last paragraph is talking about what the author or the author of this essay does not like about Salin's work, what is the problem with Salin's work. So he's telling us that not every aspect of this essay has aged well. Not every aspect is very relevant to contemporary society. So what is not relevant, what has not aged well? Number one is that it does not showcase colonial racism and disposition. Right? These themes in a very substantial format, it deals with them very cursorily, whereas they are extremely impactful to modern society. So it does not deal with them in as much seriousness as is required. That's the first criticism that the author has about this book. Second criticism he has about this book is that it is succumbing to the temptation of using foraging as a proxy for Paleolithic. Right. So proxy means that a substitute. That he's saying that Paleolithic age means everyone was foraging in that time. That is how Salin's essay deals with that particular period in history. But that is also not true. It is the same kind of a mistake that is made by people who write the opposite of whatever Salin is writing as well. That from Paleolithic age, when we progress to Neolithic age and more civilized ages, then we left behind foraging because Paleolithic age means foragers were there. So this characteristic even Salin falls prey to, and he should not have fallen prey to it. That is what the author is saying as a second form of criticism inside the last paragraph. So that's how the essay flows, and that's the end of the passage. So these are the things that I have to understand about the passage, that this is an essay on Salin's book to analyze his work, to figure out what was his primary sense of an argument and its relevance to contemporary society, while also looking at what are the things that are not relevant anymore, or things that have not aged well inside Salin's book with respect to today's society. So if we understand all of this, then let's try to unpack this entire passage. Let's try to understand what this passage is in a greater sense of depth. So the number of words of this passage is 495, which is less than the average number of words in CAT reading comprehension exercises. So shorter passage to read for sure. Type of passage, of course, is analytical in nature because the author is presenting an analysis of a book written by someone else. The source of this book is from a website called publicbooks.org, in which publicly available books people read and they write commentaries on it. And the person who has written the commentary on this in this particular essay has written this in conjunction with Center for Advanced Studies in Behavioral Sciences. So clearly this passage is from the topic of human anthropology. Anthropology is that field of study which looks at human history and tries to understand where our behaviors, where our social behaviors and our personal behaviors stem from, what kind of historical roots are there for it. And this was written in conjunction with Center for Advanced Studies in Behavioral Sciences. So clearly, this is an academic work of literature. The time to read this passage, I feel 2 minutes to 2.5 minutes, absolutely possible for people to read this passage. And if you ask me what is an acceptable time to read, I will say 3 minutes, slightly more than 3 minutes. It should not take longer than that. It should take you more longer or more time than this. Then you are wasting your time. You're not concentrating on the passage. Overall difficulty level of the passage is easy to moderate. Despite this being a passage from behavioral psychology, from a topic like anthropology, which most of us might not be familiar with. Despite that, I will categorize this passage as an easy to moderate passage for two reasons. Number one, vocabulary is not that difficult to follow. Number two, and the major reason is because every single paragraph, the purpose of it is made very clear at the very beginning of the paragraph. It's structured so well, the author does not make any effort to complicate matters at all. They are not writing a convoluted work of literature. They are writing a very simple, straightforward, linearly progressing passage. So even though the topic of discussion might be unfamiliar, but the way that it is written, it has been simplified for the minds of the reader to grasp what the author is trying to communicate. So for that reason, I feel the difficulty is easy to moderate. It's not even moderate level difficulty. And the couple of things that probably is a point to learn about if you're not already aware of it is the meanings of words like Paleolithic and meanings of words like bourgeois. So Paleolithic, paleo actually is Latin for old. Lith means stone. So Paleolithic age is the old stone age. So Neolithic is new stone. Paleolithic is old stone. So when we say paleo diet, right, you might have heard of paleo diet, which is basically a diet that does not use processed foods or uses the kind of diet that probably our ancestors very long ago, the old school diet, if you follow that, then that is what is called a paleo diet. In the same way, Paleolithic age is old stone age. You can read a bit about Paleolithic ages because history passages, anthropology passages often refer to Paleolithic and Neolithic ages. So if you know what these ages are, it can help you develop a sense of familiarity with passages where these words might be present. Similarly, bourgeois and proletariat are very Marxist concepts. So the word bourgeois is present in this passage. Apart from that, you also have the word proletariat. I would highly recommend going and reading about these two words in conjunction with Karl Marx's theory, because so many times inside CAT papers, Karl Marx's theory of communism and these two words, bourgeois and proletariat, are mentioned. Just to give you a very cursory understanding of what these two words mean. The bourgeois is the ruling class, not even the ruling class. Bourgeois in Karl Marx's theory is the business class, the people who own the industries and employ the labor, who make all the profits. Whereas the proletariat are the laborers who work inside industries and earn daily wages. So Karl Marx always talks or has his philosophy in favor of the proletariat, who he believes should have control of the legislations and the ruling of countries and ruling of societies, because they are the ones who know the actual plight of what is happening at the grassroots level. And they are the ones, in fact, who are building society with their own hands. Whereas the bourgeois are disconnected with reality. They only employ people. They don't know what is happening at the grassroots level. They look at things from a very helicopterish perspective. And that's why they should not be trusted with making legislations. And the proletariat should be trusted with making legislations and ruling societies and countries. So this is what Karl Marx's theory generally is about. You might have heard of, in social media, people often use this term bougie. Right? Bougie means someone who is very rich, someone who is very stylish, who only dines or visits very expensive places. So they are referred to as bougie these days. The word bougie actually comes from Karl Marx's bourgeois. Right? So I would recommend Googling these two words and getting a sense of understanding of the meaning of these two words from Marx's perspective, which will be really helpful for reading comprehension exercises. This is what reading of the passage should contribute to your sense of learning. And this is what you're supposed to take away from the passage as soon as you finish reading it. In the next video, the link of which I've shared below in the description of this one, I will be going through the questions and the solutions for the questions of this reading comprehension exercise. Thank you.